Awesome. Welcome everyone over here. Our fourth webinar of the year. So very excited, and it's a special topic: Agentic AI, the future of autonomous application security. So, and we have over here our guest Jackie, Robert, Maxwell. Before we get into some of the introductions, I have a quick thing for people. Just give me a moment. Yep. So let's start with something very relevant.
Hey, I'm your source code analyzer. I am an AI agent hired to discover all your APIs and data flow patterns from source code. In just minutes, I can find all your APIs regardless of type or where they reside. I can work autonomously or with you approving my work along the way. Think of me as an API security engineer for hire, ready to help you find all zombie, rogue, and third-party APIs your team may not know about. With my help, your team can focus on remediation and building proactive security measures. I can do in minutes what can take others days or even weeks to do manually. My job is to give you and your team time back to focus on the business.
All right. So I wanted to start with this video just to get into the flow of AI agents, because next 45 minutes is just going to be about agentic AI agents for application security. So let's dive in. Guys, before we start, feel free to ask any question on the channel, on here in the chat itself. There's a Q&A section as well. You can ask any questions over there. The topic is Agentic AI for AppSec, but feel free to ask other things as well on AppSec related, problems or something that you're wanting to learn. Everyone over here is very, very experienced in AppSec, so we'll be happy to answer any question that you guys have. Some agenda introductions. Obviously, we'll go through the panel discussion, and towards the end, we'll spend some like 5-10 minutes on the Q&A. Introduction on me. I am the host. I am Ankita. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Acto. And Acto is an API security platform. We are a startup. Have been in the space for 3 years, headquartered in San Francisco, and really happy to have all of you guys over here. We'll start with Max. Max is from Greenlight. He's a senior staff security engineer over there. We've known each other for a few months now, and I absolutely loved, every time we've had the conversation around AppSec, I absolutely loved his thoughts. He's very deep. He's very methodical. He's very business centric, I would say. He knows what the devs want. He's just brilliant. So we have Max over here, and Max, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you for that intro. My name's Max. I currently serve, as Ankita mentioned, Senior Staff Security Engineer for Greenlight, and I lead our product security practice. We have over 7 million active users, but the way we kind of treat product security here is that we're aiming to build security directly into our product itself, from ideation to development to testing and to our production runtime. My foundational skill set was founded in offensive application security, and previous to Greenlight, I served as a trusted advisor to Fortune 100 organizations and scale-ups as a security consultant, and then previous to that, as a professional pen tester at Visa.
Awesome. Lovely to have you over here, Max. Looking forward to having those discussions around agentic. We never talked about that when we had in the past some discussions, but let's dive deep into those. Jackie, the most, loveliest guy I've met probably in cybersecurity. Jackie, why don't you talk about yourself? He's by the way from KPMG. We've had like events at KPMG office. We've very connected with the team over there. So, Jackie, some introduction would love to have that.
Sure. Thanks for that warm introduction, Ankita, and I appreciate it. Great to meet everyone. My name is Jackie. I'm a director in KPMG Cyber Threat Management Practice. I focus on primarily application security and DevSecOps. I work with my clients to navigate the complex landscape of software security, making sure that they can protect their most valuable assets, protecting the products they're developing. I've been in this space for many years now, and I work with AppSec teams, DevSecOps teams, cloud security teams to make sure that as they're building products for their customers, that they're able to secure it to the best way possible. So happy to be part of the conversation.
Awesome. Great to have you here, Jackie. Robert, we've known each other for a few months also. Great conversations. He's head of AppSec at SMBC, MANUBANK, and Genius Bank. Robert, some introduction from yourself?
Yeah, so Robert Williamson, like Ankita said, I'm head of AppSec at SMBC MANUBANK. I was brought in to build an AppSec program at Genius Bank. My background is primarily in offensive AppSec. Spent first half of my career mostly on the vendor security side, and then the latter half more in industry. I've also had roles as head of security, founding security engineer, things like that. So yeah, glad to be back on the AppSec side.
Awesome. Great. Moving on to just some tips to join in. As I mentioned, guys, feel free to chat, ask questions. There's Q&A over here. Would love to have more, discussion around Agentic AI, what your thoughts are, if you have any concerns, those kind of things. Just generally how you're thinking about your AppSec strategy with Agentic AI. All of that will be the discussion topic today. So before we start, just a little bit of context on, why this topic. And the reason being then, of course, last month was all about events, RSA, B-sides, all of those things. We all were there at RSA. Of course, there's a lot around agentic, a lot around securing AI, a lot around using AI to do application security or cybersecurity in general. And Acto as a company is obviously pioneering a lot of agentic AI for AppSec piece. But I think the things that I've still heard from cybersecurity leaders are there's confusion. There's not knowing what to do here. There's too much noise. There's a lot to be done, but people have questions. What are those use cases? How do we use it securely? Those kind of things, So I heard so many of these conversations that I felt like there's a webinar needed. There's some discussion needed from the likes of Jackie, Max, Robert, who are trying to do this in their own world, in their own companies. So that's the context of the discussion. Let's maybe start with the fundamental number one point of discussion that we hear time and again. So which is critical use cases of agentic AI in application security. Firstly, are there critical use cases of agentic AI, or it's just bit more of a data automation or a little bit of it will help in some context, but there is no critical use case, those kind of things. So really open to that discussion. So why don't we start with Jackie? What do you think are critical use cases of agentic AI in AppSec?
Yeah, it's a great question to start off with. When I think about some of the core use cases for agentic AI, specifically in AppSec, I go back to a lot of our root challenges in this space. We're dealing with a lot of the same issues we were 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. We have a major talent shortage. The AppSec community perpetually faces a lack of talent that has this very specialized skill set. There's increasingly more and more alerts as folks added more tooling to detect new vulnerabilities. As hackers are leveraging AI, and especially the last year or so, we're seeing the rise of things like vibe coding. And so there's a massive increase in velocity in what folks are developing. And so when I do think about the real use cases and the critical use cases of agentic AI, it still comes back to the same core value adds and activities of the AppSec practitioner. So that might be things like performing secure code review. Today a typical organization might get thousands of PRs. I can see an agentic AI coming in to help narrow that down to maybe 10 critical PRs that actually materially affect the code that's worth looking at, and then helping guide an AppSec engineer through what requires review. Another core use case I see is threat modeling. I see plenty of large organizations today, clients that I work with, that aren't performing threat modeling effectively and the right times and the right places. And AI agents can help make that process a little more smooth, bring in the right context, the right knowledge to actually make those conversations effective. So there are great use cases for agentic AI, but a lot of them are still the core issues that we deal with AppSec.
Got it. Okay, so you're saying, Jackie, if I can understand correctly, there's like more, whatever we are doing today, code review or threat modeling, those can be sort of automated or autonomous using agentic AI, right?
Yep.
For use cases. Okay, great. And Max, anything over there? You work with developers a lot. What's your thought?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely align with Jackie's sentiment there. I think one of the biggest use cases we're seeing for some of this agentic AI and AppSec today is primarily with synthesizing information and reducing decision fatigue. I think, however, what I've seen here is like, although it can be really helpful for things like, as Jackie mentioned, threat modeling, even code analysis, I've seen it to be help speed up some discovery, investigative work on our end a lot faster, right? Even spinning up something in Cursor and asking it questions about a brand new code base may not be 100% accurate, but it gets me, 80% of the way there and gets me most of the answer I'm looking for to begin some more fruitful conversation. But at the end of the day, I think regardless of the technology and use, right, this is all used as a way to kind of help us to support existing processes within our organization. And I think one of the biggest kind of missing points where some organizations may not be able to just say, hey, AI is going to be our silver bullet and we're done with AppSec, right? Is that they're missing context, right? And so this context, a lot of the time, in my opinion, is locked up in our heads. Like it's normally you say, oh, you go to, our friend Rebecca over there and she's going to know how we do this thing or how we make a decision on this specific vulnerability or this specific repo. And agents, regardless of where they're coming from, they're going to need clear guidance on how do you actually make a decision when triaging something, because the agent itself can only make assumptions based on whatever it's trained off of. So I think that's one of the things that we are really kind of tackling, which is becoming a very human problem as opposed to a technology problem.
Got it. So that's a very, very good point, Max. So a couple of things that you've said is just like, reducing false positives, reducing noise is a very good use case for agents. Like looking at data and finding out what's real versus what's not real. Then fitting it into the processes. The thing that you mentioned is using agentic doesn't mean, you will be able to solve everything. Business context is lacking. It's not the technical context, data context. It has all of those things, but business context will only be with humans, with like people you're working with. So, brilliant point there, Max. I'll ask you, since you mentioned Cursor, you said 80% of your use cases are getting solved there. Can you maybe help people over here who might be using Cursor, or maybe looking at some tools like Cursor? One use case, one like maybe example of how it helps you in your
I'd say that 80% is completely arbitrary, but it does help for a lot of investigative work. So I'd say one of the things that we'll do is that maybe we pull in something I've recently had to do is that we pull in a brand new code repo that we have, and it's less so about me trying to find a specific vulnerability and more so trying to capture information on, okay, what for this specific service, based on a specific mapping that we have that we use internally, what are the APIs that you see that are external, which ones are internal? And that gives me a better sense to then say, based off of this information, which are the ones that we want to set up some automated testing for. Maybe I don't care about the internal APIs as much right now. And then I can ask it further questions. What kind of data do you see being passed in directly? Of course, it's going to miss on some things. It'll have to make assumptions based on some variable names and stuff like that. But if I was going to do a static code review manually, I'm essentially asking the same questions. It's giving me those answers. And again, it doesn't solve the problem of like, does it do my job? But it does quicken up the speed of investigation and then allow me to have a much more useful conversation with our developers and ask, hey, I've noticed that this thing is operating, these PDFs, and I've noticed that we don't have this control here. I've just tested this thing, and because of this investigative work, I can bring that over to the team and add value as opposed to just saying, hey, how do you guys do PDF validation on this service?
Got it. So, wow, very interesting case. So I think you're very, very much mentioning using AI. This is not probably AI agent or autonomous agents. It will be using AI, or it could be as simple as using ChatGPT to get context, or using Cursor to get context, and it's cutting down that time of you manually looking into the code base, trying to figure out those internal, external APIs. Instead, you're asking cursor and it's giving some meaningful information. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
but no, that's very, very useful. So, but it's more again around code reviews. So, Jackie, you mentioned code reviews. Max, you mentioned code reviews, false positive. Jackie, you also mentioned threat modeling. So, I'm just trying to put that into things in my head, and also for the discussion, what the conclusion might look like for this question. Robert, what's your thought over here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we talk about the uses of AI in AppSec, we're talking about kind of two things. You can either talk about it from the perspective of how are you using AI as an AppSec tool to support your, AppSec priorities, or you can look at it as how do we secure AI from an applications perspective where, developers are using it to build out applications. So those are two different questions with two different, answers and ways to handle it. Our focus has been primarily on the developer use case. And we're starting to look more into how we can use AI to help some of our AppSec efforts specifically, but mostly we're trying to help our developers, right? Build code faster, deploy faster, and securely. So.
Got it. So it's more helping the developers in security, in application security. That's more critical of use case.
Yeah, for my primary kind of viewpoint, that's what we've been focusing on.
Got it. No, awesome. I think so. What I'm hearing more is there's code reviews, there's like false positive detection, there's like just like working with developers to make them efficient. Those are the very critical use cases for agentic AI in application security, or maybe AI in application security, if I can say that. Great. So the next follow-up question will be, and this we talked very generic stuff, but now how have you seen your teams benefiting from agentic AI or AI? I think Max, you gave a very good example. That could be one. Jackie, what do you think? Maybe like one example, one use case that you've specifically seen.
Yeah, sure. I know we talked about some theoretical example of use cases like code review or threat modeling. I think one area that I'm seeing my clients use agentic AI for, at least testing it out, is actually around kind of augmented oversight and reporting. Th this is again one of those traditional areas that we've struggled with as an industry for a long time, whether it's being able to accurately capture, metrics precisely, or being able to convey the right message to the right people, whether it's to our developers, to our security leadership, or to the board. I'm seeing that, this is one of the first few areas that folks are comfortable using AI in general, or specifically agentic AI, to actually start developing more effectively developing reports that can be shared and provide some additional value. I think there's hesitancy, and we might talk about this later on with challenges with AI. I think there's hesitancy of doing some of the more critical security tasks for now, but with something that, can where we can inject some more human oversight, like reporting. That's an area where a lot of my clients are interested in and are starting to dive deeper into, using this to increase the effectiveness of the process.
Correct. So automated reporting and what that might look like you basically have lots of data in different tools. You fetch that data and get AI to summarize it. Those kind of things, Jackie?
Exactly. It's, trying to help provide some more context, and it might be earlier on in helping to maybe estimate the probability of vulnerabilities and the impact of that. But in general, it's helping to identify some of those trends, emerging trends, and even provide the right reporting to the right, the right audience, making sure that it is context specific. That way they're able to get the value that's needed.
Got it. Awesome. So yeah, I think Max also mentioned there's a lot of data, there's a lot of like technical analysis that AI or agentic AI can do, and that is very valuable. I think the use case is pretty similar that way. Robert, what do you think? What do you like today? You said you're trying to help devs to adopt security, be good in security. So like, what's your take over here in terms of how teams are benefiting?
Yeah, I mean, I think that working with the AI is relatively new to the bank, right? So we're trying to crawl before we can run, and but a lot of times the developers are they don't want to crawl, right? So we do our best to keep up with them. And actually where we've seen the most benefit so far is more on the like standards, policies, procedures side of the house, right? It's a lot easier for us to ingest all of our, it's a very highly regulated industry. So we have competing standards and policies from all over the place just within AppSec. So it makes it a lot easier to ask questions about our policies and procedures. Where can I find this document? How do these SLAs pertain to external facing applications versus, internal? And just getting that data in one place is really easy. And I think that there's going to be probably some evolution here to where those policies and standards aren't something that are completely separate from the development, but are actually part of like a system prompt or something almost to developers writing code. So now when they say, hey, can you create a new API endpoint that does XYZ? If your standards and policies at your organization say, when you create an API endpoint, there always has to be authentication checks or authorization checks. Now the code that's output to the developer is in compliance with that policy. So I think that we have currently AI operating in kind of silos, and we're going to start seeing more kind of merging of those things together. I think building towards that is how we're going to benefit each of the teams.
Wow, awesome. So I think you touched on very, very good 2 points, which are like just using, again, you have lots of policies and things built out. How do you leverage that data, ask very relevant questions of AI? And secondly, for the developers, it's essentially writing secure code using AI instead of, oh, you've written the code and then I'm doing the reviews and then I'm doing the testing. So more proactive, more, if I can say, shift left approach is what you're thinking might be the future.
I think that's exactly it. I think that there's going to be like a system AI or system prompt that exists for, Copilot or Cursor or whoever. And then there'll be like an enterprise level prompt that sits between your developers and the system prompt that has all of your policies, procedures, and secure coding guidelines just pre-prompted to the AI so that when the developers start talking to it, it's already getting code that's written in according to those guidelines.
Got it. Awesome. Yeah, Jackie, you have something to say? Yeah.
Yeah, and Robert, this might be a question for you. I don't know if this is a leap, but some of what you're mentioning is reminding me of the conversation of like, paved pathways, kind of preparing and sharing kind of secure by default, um, libraries and things like that for developers. Is that kind of similar to what you're mentioning of like providing the right tools, maybe AI prompted to developers so they can write securely?
That definitely could be. Yeah, look, I mean, SCA and your third-party libraries that are coming in, your software supply chain stuff, that's all you're getting less visibility into what is actually going into your code now. So yeah, I think that there's definitely some possibilities to utilize AI to help reduce that risk. I mean, you see kind of like companies like ChainGuard and some of the other vendors that build like secure containers that don't have these third-party vulnerabilities from scratch. And I think that we could see maybe on the first-party side, people starting to kind of develop things like that.
Got it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. You brought up kind of like introducing policies and first of all, fragmented policies, especially as an organization grows, and then bringing that earlier into the development life cycle. Because I think it kind of depends, in my opinion, on the size of the organization you're at, right? If I think about a lot of the scale-ups that I've operated with, you have a really heavy engineering team who's like, I'm go, go, go. I'm gonna keep building. And policies, a lot of the time, like you have this piece of paper that has very vague language on purpose so that you have like flexibility there. But it's almost like a chicken and an egg problem, right? In order to set those foundations of what we expect, we then have to then, modify some words on a paper that hardly anyone will reference. And then if you want to get further into it and start building out an actual process on what things need to be followed, then, back to that kind of decisioning, that I was sharing earlier, it's really difficult to get and even me myself as an engineer focused first person, to get myself to go and write some paper is much harder to do than it is to go, I'm going to go build this solution. So it's like you're always fighting this kind of mental battle in that way.
Yeah, and not to mention, like, if you have a large enterprise that has multiple group companies or goes through mergers and acquisitions where you're bringing in companies that were on different standards and policies, or you have a standard level that is for the top level enterprises, then each group company has, a different policy, right? Like, it gets really hairy really quick. And so being able to have an AI agent that could make sense of all of those things together and even point out contradictions because they exist, is something that no human wants to do. So
Yeah. Oh, awesome. I love this discussion. I think there is something in the chat as well, just to make sure that we are answering those. What is the difference between bot, RPA, and AI agent? RPA also made lots of promises. Maybe do you want to, like, one of you guys want to take that question, or we can take it at the end also, but or think about it.
I can throw in a quick answer, and Max, if you have anything to add, feel free to as well. But for me, agentic AI is a significant leap beyond traditional bots and even LLMs. It's able to exhibit autonomous decision making and goal-oriented behavior. Like that's the main difference. Agents are able to actually independently form their own goals and plan, multi-step actions. And the main difference, I think, in my mind, is being able to execute those actions with minimal human oversight. I think traditional bots that we might think about are kind of defined scripts of how to do certain activities and things like that. And agentic AI and agents in that manner are able to, perform actions without them being predefined by someone that needs to be in the loop.
Yeah, I actually really like this question because I've had this discussion with a lot of other people previously, and I think that for me, when I look at this new modern coining and marketing term of AI agent, in my opinion, we've had agents for a long time. I think RPA is kind of the most primitive form of what we've had previously. At the end of the day, the definition of an agent is to be able to independently execute on some form of task, just as Jackie mentioned, right? But I think the difference is that they need to have the capability to reason, break down a problem, access several different systems in order to solve that problem. And then on top of that, leverage feedback so that they can improve over time. So RPA, you can totally do that, right? But you have manual human intervention to kind of tune a tool and kind of give it that adjustment that it needs. But, in my opinion, we've been using agents, like the quote unquote agent term, in a very primitive form. But the main difference here and kind of the advancement in the space in the most recent years that's now become more accessible to us is that previously humans are the ones who had to engineer these exact workflows along with the exact error handling and how we're going to tune it. This kind of takes it to a new stage. And if you're able to leverage the technology effectively and orchestrate them in that manner, you have the ability to then autonomously engineer these workflows themselves. But again, you have to have that foundational process to build that in place, because in RPA automation and basic automation, automating a broken process is still a broken process. If you try to use AI to fix a broken process, it's still a broken process.
Come on, weird. So AI can't solve the process problems, which I totally agree with. It can solve like independent tasks, but not like process related problems. I hope the question, we got the answer to the question who's asked, Prasad. Let's move on to the next one, which is, so I think, Jackie, you mentioned there is some hesitance. There is, like people are still thinking, can they use it? Can they use AI or AI agents in a safe manner? And this I hear from our customers, our conversation all the time when we say, let's start using the AI agent, and they want to use it. But the first question that comes is, how do we use it safely? What can we do to make sure the data that's going to AI for processing is, safe, it's handled in a safe way, no data is leaking, those kind of questions, right? Like, so maybe touch on those, because that's a very big step. We need to solve this before we can, get people to adopt AI agents, especially for AppSec cases. So, Jackie, why don't you talk about this?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. I mean, the core of it comes down to, for each organization, they need to have a an idea of what the right governance model is for them for governing AI. They need to have defined policies and procedures about what it means to effectively and securely use AI. And it's going to depend a lot on the context of the organization. I think Robert was mentioning, depending on if you're in a highly regulated industry versus maybe a new startup, the way you think about and use and trust in AI is going to be a lot different. I have a lot of clients in financial services, and they're not going to be performing the same actions using AI to the same extent that, brand new startup is. Especially for highly regulated industries, we need to be able to trust in AI decisions. And unfortunately, today, a lot of the agents are taking actions that aren't entirely explainable. They might be able to do things like auto isolate device, modify security policies, and it's going to be pretty difficult to trace decision logic or justify actions during audits. And especially if you're in, a highly regulated industry, that's going to be a really tough hurdle to get past. And so for me, the right first step for teams to start experimenting with AI agents comes back to just setting the ground rules for within the organization what does it mean to use AI effectively and safely and securely. And that comes back to defining the AI governance policy that we should be following.
Got it. So the first step for the teams is define the AI governance policy. It could be, I don't know, like, can you actually define, maybe give an example of what that AI governance policy will be?
Sure. So, in general, it might be starting off with the pillars that we care about. In some organizations, again, it might come back to I care a lot about explainability, transparency, or in some industries, it might be I care a lot about privacy in the data that we're using, or it might be I care a lot about equitability and making sure that the outputs are just. And so there's a lot of different foundational pillars that we might build our AI governance policy around. But it's as an organization, like this requires leadership oversight input of what do we care about, because this is what's going to roll down to our teams. Again, if you're a fast moving new startup, maybe care more about the output and making sure you're getting value from AI quickly. But if you're in a large organization that's regulated, you care about making sure that it's rolled out safely, securely, in a manner that doesn't break anything that's already there.
Got it. Perfect. Max, what do you think should be the right step to safely use AI or AI agents?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two things. I think I really like the policy mentioned from Jackie there, because I'm a big proponent of that. But I think second to that, where security teams, a lot of them are highly technical, right? And I'd say from engineering standpoint, highly technical also means sometimes we're not as good at things like metrics. And I think because of that, it's hard to really demonstrate value, like business value. And this comes back down to even when we do the foundational tasks like vulnerability management. What is the importance of us fixing these things for the business? And so I think for something to be truly agentic, it has to be able to operate independently. But in order to get there, to kind of get to this point of safe experimentation with a full agent in that sense, is that using AI as kind of a supportive mechanism at the beginning to kind of suggest action and then start building out metrics of how effective was it? Did we take on the suggestion from it? And then based off of all this information that we're learning over time, again, I'm kind of taking all of my experience from operating within scale-ups that don't have as much documentation available to them, using this all as a feedback loop for how do we want to level set our existing policies. And then beyond, policies by nature are high level. So from there, how do we want to provide more detailed procedural documentation on how we make decisions as a department? And then this way, rather than all of the contextual, whatever technology we're using, all that context being wrapped up inside of a tool itself, that makes it really difficult as for you to have flexibility and where your tool set's going to expand over time. Then bringing that back into, it might be boring, but procedural documentation, so we can now provide consistent context across a whole variety of systems.
Got it. I want to touch upon a point that you mentioned earlier, which was, using cursor for security. So I'm taking it as an example because that's an AI tool that has AI agent. So how's that used safely? What was the decision made? Like I know it's a dev tool, but how that was brought into the organization? How's that used safely? What do you think when you use that? Yeah.
Yeah, I can take that on. I think our organization, just like many others, they use a variety of kind of AI tools. Cursor I use as an example of kind of mentioning across different organizations I've talked to as well. They may be using it as one of the tools within their tool belt for developers. I think foundationally, before I kind of answer that security question, is that I think it's really important for security teams to be operating within the context of how engineering operates. That's the kind of best way to understand like what their normal workflows look like, so we're not creating any sort of disruption. And whether it's Cursor or whether you're using Gemini, ChatGPT, any of that decision factor, you're going to take on some form of risk to be able to enable a new technology and see if the benefit is there for the organization. In order to, I'd say, use it securely, is really to understand what type of information are we sending to it? How is it isolated within our environment? What options do we have with that vendor to ensure that our data is not being used to train other people's, information? And unfortunately, I think a lot of the times, these are things that either we have very clear, concrete kind of technical controls we can put in place, whether it's IP allow listing between what we talk to. I won't get into whole inventory of all that, but even coming back down to things that are, in my opinion, sometimes a little soft, right? Which is like our SOC 2 reports that sure they claim that, based on audit evidence, it's done what it's done, it's what they claim to do. And a lot of times organizations are making vendor decisions, whether it's Cursor or anything else based on these things. So again, to kind of summarize, there's always risk in what you're doing.
Got it. Yeah, no. Oh, and by the way, just to clarify, like we don't have any partnership with Cursor or anything. It was just used as an example. So, because like most devs are using it, our devs are using it. So just wanted to understand what those decisions were when they were made for using anything like Cursor or ChatGPT. They are all AI tools. So why like organizations are using it?
Yeah, I guess, sorry to highlight a little bit more here, is that especially when I look at these code generation tools, it comes back down to what does our process look like to intake code? If it follows the same exact pipeline that we have we have SCA in place, we have SaaS in place, we have our secret scanning, we have all those things that we kind of run in our CI/CD pipelines. If it follows that same path, it's not to say whether or not those are perfect, right? But it meets the standards that we have today, meaning we still have a single point where if we want to make advancements in that area, all inputs will still enter that space. But if we have problems, they'll just be further exacerbated by the increase in velocity.
Got it. Got it, Max. Yeah. And I'm hearing, like, I think this pattern over here, I'm hearing a lot about, just writing secure code, being the code. Like, there's a lot of use cases around AI just in the code itself. So I think that's probably one of the key takeaways I'm taking from here. Instead, like, I'm not hearing more around the dynamic testing or runtime protection or SEA, like those kind of things, but more around, hey, how do you help developers write secure code? How do you find how do you create those policies, those kind of things I'm hearing. Robert, what's your take on this? You guys are experimenting with it. Are you guys also writing policies? What is the first step?
I mean, it's Max touched on it a little bit, but it comes back to trust but verify, right? Like you cannot just go into it hoping that AI is going to solve the problem that you're implementing it to do right away, right? Like you need to let it go in and do what it's going to do, see what results are coming from that, and fact check every single one of them. So you're almost, in order to experiment with it, you kind of have to do everything twice. You have to do it your regular way, and then you have to do it with AI, and you have to see where the deltas are. And maybe it's doing some of your old processes better, but maybe it needs more training on the new processes. So with any new technology, that's kind of what you have to do. You just have to take what the sales pitch is kind of at face value, and then go in and play with it, and hopefully it meets your expectations, right?
Got it. Awesome. Yeah, we have like about 10 minutes left, just in the interest of time. There are a couple of questions that I have. I think this one is very important. What new skills or roles do you think AppSec teams will need as agentic or AI becomes standard? And this is going to happen. Everyone is adopting it. I know it's all still early for agents, but at least in my head, I think by end of this year there will be a lot of adoption here. So, what skills roles are you thinking, or there's no change in skills? What do you think? Maybe Jackie, why don't you say something?
Sure. Yeah, this is again a great question. I think for me, when I picture the AppSec teams of the future, it's going to be comprise, to your point, of humans, agents, and then also kind of some tool orchestration in the middle, maybe through like an MCP powered platform or something. Humans will need to lead the strategic design and decisions for operational flows, and I think that's the core skills and roles that the humans need to play. Today, we obviously see a wide spectrum of activities that, maybe an entry level to a mid-level AppSec engineer is performing. A lot of it's going to be maybe automated away through agentic AI. The AI agent's going to be able to do those routine tasks with the right context, maybe such as triaging and remediating alerts, at least from the start. And so I think in my mind, those humans in the loop now need to be able to focus on being more strategic, thinking more long term, defining, and to what Maxwell was saying earlier, being able to fix maybe broken processes. Today I think we're so focused on just chasing the inevitable backlog we have of just like findings that are stuck in our queue. We're so focused on just dealing with the fire we have today. No, not many of the AppSec engineers I know are focused on those long term strategic conversations, and that's going to be such a critical skill for them to be doing once agentic AI is taking on some of the more routine activities.
Got it. And what's your take, Max, on what Jackie just mentioned?
Yeah, definitely align. I mean, I think deep technical knowledge is always going to be a formidable long-term asset for any professional. But I think one of the things AI is going to naturally run into problems or run into challenges when it's trying to solve some esoteric problem that only someone with deep technical knowledge is going to be able to be uniquely positioned to course correct that agent to operate effectively. But I think as technical execution becomes further abstracted, technical depth is what's going to be what separates the good and great in the AppSec world. But at the end of the day, I think it'll be really, really interesting to see how the transformation of the workforce in this space will evolve, because you take a lot of engineers and for myself, I'll speak for myself. I came into AppSec because I loved breaking things. It was a lot of fun to break stuff, right? And as I think we advance in this space, breaking stuff's still going to be fun. It doesn't mean it will be less, but the value of being able to break something as opposed to make systemic decisions for the organization is going to be vastly different. And I think it will be definitely a challenge to change the mindset of a lot of existing engineers in the space today to go from pure technical execution and then moving into kind of that strategic conversation of how do we start capturing metrics, right? They don't appear out of thin air. There's a maturity levels to metrics. You can't just capture, ROI tomorrow on a specific initiative that you have. And then I think second is, providing more of that decision context of a lot more documentation, because we can have AI help us to support writing this piece of paper, but at the end of the day, I still need to pull it out of my brain and put it out onto something, and then also make sure that test it against our agent's behavior, governing its actions and measuring its effectiveness over time against the information that we had, and modifying that over time as well, so that we can refine those documents that at the end of the day will also become part of our SOC 2 reports, right? Or part of our other compliance standards that we have. So I think comes back down to evolving how we measure metrics, how we do metrics, and then also how we make decisions based on that. And metrics are not easy. You can make very bad metrics and be making poor decisions based on that as well.
Got it. Yeah, and I think I also want to give some context over here. So I think about this all the time, right? Like, we are a very fast growing startup, and we need every single person, including me, to upskill themselves in this world, in the agent world, in the AI world. I think it's very known now that it's not going to be AI agent who are replacing people. It's going to be the people who are very good at using AI or AI agent to be productive, who are going to replace the people who can't do that? So that was, I think that my question is more around, will you look for those people to join your team who are very well versed with using the right prompts, using the AI in the right way, using agents in the right way? Because as you said, 80% of your time Cursor solves most of your 80% of your work in terms of some queries. So now, but you, Max, you're trained on it, you're working on it, you're improving your skill there. 6 months back, probably you were not doing it, but now you're doing it. But in your team, is everyone doing it? Are you looking at hiring people who can do those kind of things, make themselves productive? That's more where I'm going.
Gotcha. No, I'd say actually, regardless of I think all of these kind of skills can be taught over time and learned. Any technical skill, whether it's using an agent, can be learned. I think one thing that's really hard to train, that whenever I'm interviewing others or looking at new talent to develop and things like that, is really comes back down to how do you make a decision for the organization. If somebody is like a really, basic example is like sometimes you'll see someone who's very inconsistent in how they make a decision. They invest a lot of time into one problem. That's super awesome. But if we can't repeat that result over and over again, that's going to look bad because that means we can't produce the same quality every time. So I like to say this thing where I'd rather have us do a mediocre job, consistently with a single process of how we do that than a really good job one time.
Yeah, no, I love that thought, Max. Jackie, you have a question. Sorry, something to say. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love what Max was saying there because I completely agree. Like I think when I interview folks and talk to AppSec engineers as well, there's a main difference and a critical skill gap I see between someone that's entry level and someone that is able to build and has some of those more strategic organizational context decision making abilities. And that comes back to being able to think about what's the right thing for not just security, but our entire organization. An entry-level AppSec engineer might think that the goal is to reduce volume alerts, burn down our tech backlog and get through all of our security debt. That's awesome, but if you tell an agentic AI to do that as a human, it might clear out and suppress all our low severity alerts. That's not what we want because that's the wrong thing for us to do as an organization. We have to be able to think about what is the right decisions to make in the business context as well. Maybe sometimes it's not always just security being right. Sometimes we have to allow exceptions, making sure that, we are able to have a conversation with the business of what the right thing is long term to enable us to actually provide value as security. We don't want to just be the team of no telling them they can't do anything and using AI to enable that. We need to be able to have the conversations of how do we use AI to actually benefit and enable the business to do what they need to.
Yeah, perfect. Robert, what's your take on this? You are a head of AppSec. You're thinking about hiring all the time and or, upskilling your team and those kind of things. How do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a while before it's like something I'm looking for on a resume. But I think the learning like natural language prompts is something that in the next or the younger generation is already like almost second nature. It's not like a skill set that people are going to college for, taking courses on. I mean, some people are, right, because they're trying to catch up. But from the generation coming in, a lot of them are already kind of there. So I don't think that that's going to be something that we really need to look for. It might be something more that if you're not currently using AI and learning it in your daily life, you may need to kind of take a course or build that skill set. Um, I also think that it's something like if you have those technical folks on your team, 10 years ago, everybody needed to know Python, right? In order to, well, maybe not
Yeah.
10 years ago, but you needed to know Python to be an AppSec because you have to script everything, you have to automate everything you do. It's the only way that you're going to be able to do it. And those people are probably going to use scripting Python less and prompting an AI to script Python for them more. So I think people will continue to use it to automate a lot of their tasks that they don't want to have to do on the daily. But I don't know that this is going to be like a big skill set that everybody needs to have in AppSec. I think that some people will have it naturally and some people will make do kind of without.
Got it.
Yeah, actually, to add a little bit to that, I think that as agentic AI, further abstracts technical execution, I think it will actually increase and open the room for the talent pool, to be honest, because that means that a lot of the work that we're operating on today, we have more room to invest in things like process engineering. I think at the end of the day, whether it's security, whether it's quality, whether it's engineering, or you're in legal finance, it's all a process problem on how that department decides to operate and provide value for the business. So if we have some of the technical execution being supported there, now we can start to have better measurements on how do we operate as a department. And you don't need security specific knowledge to make better processes. You might need some additional context from some of your more deep technical expertise peers. But yeah, I think you have a lot more value to gain out of those in that way.
I love that point, Max, because today I see so much artificial gatekeeping, and that leads to AppSec teams being able, like, just struggling to hire the right people. It has to be someone with 5 years of development background, 10 years of security background. You're not going to find that. To your point, like, if we can abstract away some of those technical needs, we can have someone that's a good process engineer to help fix a lot of the broken processes we all have in our AppSec teams. I love that idea.
Awesome. No, I think Max, you've hit the nail right? Process engineering, like having processes in place, that can't be replaced by AI, obviously. That's going to be a very fundamental job also. But yeah, like processes solve lots of problems, and we've had that discussion earlier. But yeah, that's an interesting role that we're going to have. The last question, or maybe my personal question that I have from all of you guys is, what's your honest opinion, honest take on the future of AI agents in AppSec? Not today. Today we know that it's early. We already went through it, all of that discussion. But what's your future take on agentic AI for AppSec? Maybe I don't know, Robert. Why don't you start?
I mean, I think kind of like what I was just saying, I think that AI is going to be just another tool that is used to automate and facilitate everything we're already doing. I think some things are going to get easier, right? Certain vulnerability classes are going to become very trivial, right? Like we don't see SQL injection as much as we used to 10 years ago, because everybody knows how to, perform protections against SQL injection. And so I think we're going to see an influx of vulnerabilities that come, or we're already seeing an influx of vulnerabilities from AI, and we're going to start seeing those kind of go away. I think my bigger concern, and it's not specific to AppSec, is that I think we're going to start seeing biases shift from a lack of language or LLM data to kind of purchased bias. So like ad revenue kind of stuff, right? So instead of having an unbiased, if you will, AI agent, you're going to have an agent that's going to recommend a product or service or a way of doing something that is actually sponsored by some other company, right? And I think that we're going to have to figure out a way to kind of combat that on the security side.
Got it. What about you, Max?
I think that's actually a super interesting point because I think this kind of goes back into when we're looking at how we leverage agents to design, or from a design phase, right? From like data pipeline poisoning, is where is it getting this information from? And I think Jackie had mentioned earlier about how does it make a decision? Where is the data provenance, right? In terms of where the source is. But to answer your question, I think, I completely agree with you, Robert, that it's going to be just another tool in the tool belt. Right now, I think there's a lot of market hype, which is great. I think it's a great place for us to be in to accelerate how we're operating. But I think within the next few years, it'll be really clear which companies how they've had their foundations right in terms of metrics and processes. Because if you don't have those metrics, processes, and your boring pieces of paper to provide a consistent context across tools, you will not be able to leverage the full benefits of this technology. So what you'll see on, in my opinion, those executive reports that we share is that teams that don't operate really well, that have maybe 1 or 2 quarters where they brought in some new AI feature and it did something, but after that you won't see anything else beyond that, compared to the teams that are really advancing this space.
Got it. No, Jackie, what's your thought on this future of autonomous AppSec?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to agree with everything Max and Robert said. I think it's important for us to ground ourselves and remind ourselves that what we're talking about here and the benefits and the hype that we have around agentic AI comes back to solving the root problems that we have in AppSec that I was talking about earlier, and security in general. It's the lack of talent, the talent shortage. It's an ever increasing backlog of security debt, and it's just the increased false positive rate and all that stuff. And so we're dealing with the same issues we were decades ago. And now this new paradigm is just removing that, moving from style detection and severity-based prioritization, all that stuff, to be able to kind of fix those at machine speed. But it's going to take a pretty steep adoption curve to get there.
Yeah.
We talked about how most teams are kind of tiptoeing into this now and aren't going to be using this at scale in the next, even year or two, maybe even 5 years. I'm excited for when everything, all the use cases we talked about today are actually in place at most organizations, but it's going to take a long time for us to get there and be comfortable with the agents we're talking about today.
Correct. I think I have similar-ish view. I feel like developers are way ahead in terms of using agentic and AI for their writing the code, etc. But when it comes to application security or security in general, it will take some time because just the nature of the work is so that you need to make sure that it's safe before you use it, and there are good applications for it, not like just some Delta application. So I agree, but I think there's a lot of people are curious. People want to understand how this thing is going to help me. That's there, and that makes us that gives a lot of thought. In the sector itself, you can build something, you can experiment with something, but obviously 80% of it today is kind of fraud, as you said. But we'll see how it goes. It's a very interesting time to be building, to be solving for problems, to be managing teams. So awesome. So I think kind of out of time, I'm just going to move with a few things. Guys, we have some agentic resources at actor.io/agentic resources. Go ahead, if you want, you can download those for all the participants over here. There are a couple of questions. I'm just going to ask panelists to answer those. Cursor.ai, if there's somebody who said that if we are moving towards autonomous code generation, then code review from security application security assessment businesses will shrink substantially, if not vanish. Yeah, not a question, but more like a comment. But in chat, there is, how do you see AI impacting, improving RAS testing? We only have a minute left. Despite advancements, AI system can... Does anyone want to take, maybe we can take one question. Does anyone want to take the first question? How do you see AI impacting RAS testing?
For RASP, I mean, I don't think AI moves fast enough yet to do that in real time. That's going to be that's going to require a lot more computing power and decision-making power to make a decision like that quickly, but it could improve it. It could improve it. It's definitely an area that needs improvement. And I think it's an area that we're all kind of moving towards. So yeah, I'm interested to see how that can get improved too. But I think speed is going to be the biggest factor, even more so than decision making.
Awesome. Yeah, and actually last one is not a question, it's more like a comment, but it's fine. But this will be this is recorded, guys, and it will be uploaded on the website. Firstly, thanks everyone. Thanks Jackie, Robert, Max for being here. Wonderful discussion. I learned a lot. I don't know if you guys did, but I learned a lot, and hopefully we can have more of these discussions. This is an early space. Everyone is learning from each other. So great that we could have this. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for
everyone.
hosting.
Yeah, this is great.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.